Now, 18 minutes for a talk is not a lot of time, especially if you have many topics to talk about. Pay particular attention to the topics in red. So those are central to my talk, namely alternative futures, and in particular desirable alternative futures, patents, and artificial intelligence. Keep an eye out also on the other topics and the other keywords. You'll be surprised how closely these fit together. Now, I start with a topic that's dearest to myself, namely myself. So, what am I? Well, by trade, I'm a philosopher, which means what? I work in a philosophy department, I teach, and I conduct research in philosophy. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, isn't philosophy a defunct discipline? Do philosophers have any skills that are relevant to today, to the modern world? Well, actually, we do have some skills. One skill in particular, the foremost skill, is logic. Now, this is not logic, as we all know, love and misuse. It's a bit more organized than that. It consists of a bunch of rules that you apply sequentially to move from a set of arguments, from a set of premises rather, to a conclusion. So what do philosophers use logic for? Well, among other things, we like to talk about possible future states or possible states of the world. So imagine now that this red dot, that I don't need to use my laser to point to, but I do, is the current state of the world. So this is the current state of the world in terms of the abilities and limitations that our world has, that humanity has. Right? Okay, now take this next row of pink dots, which represent future, short-term future possible states. Only one of these is going to become our future. Only one of them is the actual future. And then take another row of these bluish-looking possible states, future states, which are in the long term, right, in the long run. Again, only one of these is going to become our actual world. Okay, well, surely there are some desirable future states and some undesirable ones. We can even imagine one such desirable state, namely a state where we have universal mental and physical health. We have universal peace, we have universal justice, universal happiness, universal education, universal longevity, an increase in longevity, universal enablement, and so forth and so forth. Now, two questions arise at this point. One, how do we steer ourselves towards this future, this desirable future? And two, can we make this future come to us faster? Can we accelerate our approach to this future? Now, pessimists would say that there is nothing we can do to change what's going on right now. There's nothing that's going to improve our chances to get to that desirable future. There's nothing that's going to improve our chances to basically make that future come faster towards us, get there faster, right? So they would say there's no room for improvement. So we do want to get there faster. They would say there's no room for improvement. And now I'd like to shoot that view down. Basically, I'd like to point out that this view, this pessimism about there is no room for improvement, has been proven wrong in the history many a time. And I'm going to take a case from physics, from the history of physics. And the history of physics starts with the history of philosophy. So you have Aristotelian physics reigning supreme for over 1,500 years until this guy comes along. This is Galileo, who contradicts the Aristotelians and proves with experiments that the Aristotelians are wrong, and he proposes his own ideas, namely that bodies accelerate uniformly, freely falling bodies accelerate uniformly. Now, this idea that didn't stay in the public sphere too long before somebody else came along, namely Newton, who corrected Galileo and also corrected Kepler, synthesized the ideas of both, added his own ideas into the mix, and created what we now know as Newtonian or classical physics. Now, this man, Newton, introduced the idea that you get these uniform accelerations of bodies, you get all sorts of accelerations of bodies due to the concept of force. And in particular, of course, he introduced this idea of gravitational force. But that wasn't to last either. A few hundred years later, we get this other man. Actually, we get a bunch of other men in the early 20th century, but this man is very important. This is Albert Einstein, who basically supplanted classical physics, or a part of classical physics, arguing that gravity is nothing other than massive objects, objects with mass, that distort the space-time around them. So what's the lesson we get from all of this? The lesson we get from this is that people throughout history thought that there was no room for improvement. They thought that the advocates of Aristotelianism thought that that was basically the complete story or near the complete story, and so on, all the way to our current state of the world. But this has been proven wrong, right? So if we take that lesson now and apply it to our more general case about desiring whether we can change right now our current state of the world and near states, so short-term states of the world, such that we can bring about that desirable state, and also we can bring about that desirable state faster. If we apply that lesson here, then we should allow there to be room for improvement. There should be things that we can do such that we can bring that desirable state within our sight, right? Okay, so what do we do then? I don't want to leave you like that. You know, philosophers tend to do that. They tend to talk about abstract things and then they leave you with no solution. I want to talk about a solution, right? This is one of many solutions, and it has to do with patents. So patents, what are patents? Well, patents, roughly speaking, are there to secure rights over inventions. There are two major patenting offices, the USPTO, United States Patent and Trademark Office, and the EPO, the European Patent Office. These offices have been working for years to harmonize their regulations, and the upshot is that with few exceptions, a patent now lasts about 20 years from the date of filing. Now, there's something particularly weird about patents, namely that once you get a patent, this information is published, so in a sense it's freely available, but of course it's not. Why? Well, because you can't really use this information. It's there, it's dangling in front of you, but you can't really use it. And why is that? Well, because the patent holder, and I quote now from the USPTO, has the right to exclude others from making, using, offering for sale, or selling the invention, US Code Section 154. So the patent holder has a license, and they can choose whether or not to share this license with other people. So oftentimes they might not want to. They might want to capitalize on this license themselves, to have a monopoly of sorts. And also, even if they decide to sell it or to license it to other people, this patent, then what ends up happening is that they can impose really prohibitively expensive conditions on the license of this patent, right? Okay. So, now I don't want to talk about patents indiscriminately. I want to focus on one particular area of patents, namely the area of artificial intelligence, so AI patents. Now, big tech companies are currently stocking up on these patents. According to Tseng and Ting, 2013, this is a survey. Between the years 1976 and 2010, there were 5,228 AI patents. That's a lot of AI patents. Why are patents, AI patents in particular, so important? Why do I want to focus on AI patents? Well, to understand this, we first need to understand a distinction that's often made in the AI literature, namely that there are two kinds of AI problems. There are the hard AI problems. These are problems that if we could solve, that would be tantamount to basically inventing a machine that has human-level intelligence, like general human-level intelligence. So an example of this would be natural language processing, in particular, the ability to use natural language. So this machine would have the ability to use natural language as well as a human being, if not better. But then there are the soft AI problems. These are less demanding, of course. They're easier to solve. They don't have to be so easy. And these are basically very specialized programs that do well in one particular area, maybe even better than human beings. But they're very specialized, right? They lack this quality of having general human-level intelligence, right? Okay. To give an example here, there are expert systems dating back to the 80s that help make medical diagnoses. These have proved even better in some cases than actual doctors making diagnoses. Now, returning to our original question, why are AI patents so important? This is the most important point now. It is that cracking these problems, being able to invent machines that can think like human beings, not exactly like, but have the abilities similar to ours, is kind of opening the doorway to a bunch of other solutions. Why? Because by inventing those machines, you're inventing other problem solvers. You solve one problem, and then a whole bunch of them get solved. So that's why they're so important, especially if we can crack the hard AI problems. Now, as an illustration of the stupendous potential AI holds, consider the following photo, which is of perhaps the greatest meeting of, or the most wonderful meeting of great minds. This is the fifth conference of Solvay in physics from 1927. There were 29 attendees. So 17 of these had either already earned a Nobel Prize or were about to in the future. Let me point to this guy in the middle. You've seen him before in my earlier slides. That's Albert Einstein. This is Hendrik Lorentz, and that's Marie Curie. That's just 3 of them. Now imagine if we could produce minds of this caliber artificially. Imagine we could have these 29 minds artificially, right? We could produce them. And imagine that these are artificial minds, so they don't get tired, they don't get depressed, they don't die. So imagine how much more output they would have than real human beings. Now, let's take this crazy thought to the extreme. Suppose artificial minds could be produced in a factory at the same rate that a factory nowadays produces computers. So 29 would quickly become 58, would quickly become 87, and so on and so on. The potential for accelerating research, for accelerating innovation, discovery, for getting to that desirable future is staggering if we could solve that, if we could do that. Now back to the real world, back to current AI research. Although great strides have already been made in the real world, there is also, here as elsewhere, as in many other fields, there is a bottleneck effect. Namely, in order to solve some problems, you need to solve some other problems first. And part of the problem is that sometimes we do have solutions for these problems, but they're not readily accessible. And among other things, we have patents, patenting laws, and patenting conventions to thank for that. Let me stress this point in a different way, with a different metaphor. Now, suppose that you're trying to solve a problem, it's a puzzle, and you're missing one piece. And suppose that someone else has this piece, and they're going to have it for the next 20 years. Right? Suppose you don't have access to this piece now. What do? Well, that's an awfully long time to wait to solve your puzzle. 20 years, that's really slowing down your research. So you might end up trying to basically reinvent the wheel, so to speak, trying to come up with another solution that hopefully is not going to infringe the patent of the person we already talked about, the original holder of this piece, right? Or you can, if you're lucky, get a license from this company if you are lucky and if you have the money and all that, and if they're willing to give you the license. Now, what can we do? Well, I think you've been seeing this coming a long way now. I'm in favor of abolishing patents, in particular AI patents, because those are super crucial. All the other ones are kind of secondary. There could be more compromise solutions. I'm not going to talk about them now, but you can imagine these being, reducing the number of years you have a patent for and da-da-da-da-da, right? Now, I don't want to finish the talk without giving you some idea of what the counterargument would be, and I would like to address this counterargument. It goes a little something like this. It costs money to innovate, so investors would not be willing to pump money into innovators if there was no way to secure their some profit. So if you don't have any patents, you can't secure the profits, therefore you're not willing to invest as an investor, and therefore the innovators are going to lack your support and they won't be able to come up with their brilliant ideas. That's the argument, right? Now, this, I think, is a curious little piece of smelly reasoning. It's a bit of stinky reasoning, and I'll give you 4 reasons why. Number 1 is a historical reason. There was a time before patenting laws and patenting conventions, and there were inventions before those laws and conventions. A particularly fruitful time was the Renaissance. That was the beginning of patenting laws and conventions. They were still quite marginalized, and a lot of innovation came out of the Renaissance without any patents. That includes the microscope and the printing press that allowed piracy to flourish. Hooray. Okay, so the second reason against this argument is that there's an abundance of creative people out there, and many of them, you can walk into a university, you'll find many creative people, students and faculty alike. There are armies of artists and writers, and not all of them get a lot of money for their great ideas. In fact, a lot of them, definitely myself, I don't care so much about money. I do care about recognition, and we can prize those two things apart. You can have a certain system under which somebody gets the recognition they deserve for their innovation, but they don't need to profit, at least they don't need to profit too much, excessively from it. Thirdly, the financial cost of these innovations is overinflated. Oftentimes, more than anything, what you need are good brains with good ideas. Sometimes you need, of course, very expensive equipment, but even those problems can be solved. You can spread the risk by having cooperative investors, right? And again, excessive profit, does it have to be in the picture? Actually, I'm not done yet. The 4th reason is it's this profit reason, actually, right? So you can still make profits even if you don't have patents. This happened before patenting laws. It's going to happen after we abolish them, and we will abolish them at some point. It's progress. Okay, so I wish I could claim I was the first person who argued for abolitionism, but in fact, I'm not. I want to cry. No, but to be precise, the movement goes back at least to the 19th century, and here's a nice paper that's been making waves. It's a general case. It's not about AI patents. It's a general case against patents from Baldwin and Levine. So this is from 2012. Finally, I'd like to summarize what I've told you today so that you get a clear idea of what I said. Well, I said that there are desirable futures out there and we should try and fast-track them. AI innovation is very promising in allowing us to fast-track these innovations, these desirable futures, rather. Thirdly, patents impede innovation for the reasons I mentioned. And finally, that's why we should abolish patents, in AI at least. Thank you very much.